Yeah, Chairman, as you shut down the government, you voted to shut down the government, and you're sitting here, our law enforcement officers aren't being paid. They're out there working to protect you. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will.
What you just heard wasn't just a jab, it was a warning shot. Because this wasn't a calm Senate exchange about procedure. It was a collision between two priorities. One side demanded inside conversations and political gotchas. The other side talked like the country is on fire and someone needs to move now. And here's the real question. When public safety is the subject, why does oversight so quickly turn into obsession? Watch what happens next, because the longer this goes, the clearer the pattern becomes.
I believe cutting federal grant programs to law enforcement in my state and across the nation does not make us any safer, and you've done just that. You've supplanted that decision by sending in National Guard troops to California and other places. That is a situation where the governors have not asked for that help. If you truly wanted to do this on a bipartisan basis, you wouldn't defy a governor, you would work with them. I'm prepared to do that. I'm prepared to work with this administration. But cutting these grants to law enforcement does not make us any stronger as a nation or give us the tools we need to reduce crime in Chicago. Now, I'd just like to ask you, when it came to this Cutter situation, did you consult with the ethics office in the Department of Justice before making your decision on this gift of a jet?
Chairman, I didn't gift a jet to anyone. My Office of Legal Counsel provides confidential advice to the President, to the White House, period. And you're conflating two issues. Cutting grants, I was very clear about what grants we've cut and what grants we haven't, only 7%. And if you have a grant in Illinois that you think that I've cut that is protecting law enforcement officers or your people, you personally call me and I will work with you to turn that grant back on. I think many of the Democrats here can tell you, I have worked with them to turn grants back on. There's an appeal process. Tell me a specific grant that I have turned off in Illinois that would help law enforcement, and I will work with you. But you have not done that.
Did you take a look?
The National Guard is on the way right now as we speak. Oh, by the way, so is Director Patel and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. You're sitting here grilling me, and they're on their way to Chicago to keep your state safe.
Madam Attorney General, it's my job to grill you. Investigation of your agency is part of my responsibility and this committee. You may not like the experience, but others have weathered the storm and answered questions in a respectful manner.
Can you tell me the grants,
yes.
Ranking Member, please?
Take a look at the President's budget on HIDA grants. What happens to it in his proposed budget?
I'd be glad to meet with you on the
It's
grants.
cut by 1/3 from $300 million to 196. That's one example of a grant that works, and your administration has suggested cutting it in the budget lies ahead. I want to ask you about items in a letter I sent you in July that you have not answered. In February, you made a public claim that the Epstein client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now for review, end of quote. You then produced already public information and no client list at a major media event hosted at the White House. Attorney General Bondi, why did you publicly claim to have the Epstein client list waiting for your review and then produce nothing relevant to that claim?
Senator Durbin, if you listen to my entire clip on that, I said I had not reviewed it yet, that it was sitting on my desk along with the JFK files, the Martin Luther King files, and I said I had not yet reviewed it. And if you see our memo on Epstein, you will see, excuse me, our memo on Epstein clearly points out that there was no client list, our July 6th memo. You also didn't let me respond to the HIDA question. The budget transfers $196 million for high-intensity drug trafficking areas to the Office of Justice Programs, OJP. The Justice Department will continue to administer those grants under OJP in 2026.
Going back to the Epstein files, according to another whistleblower who made a protected disclosure to my office, you pushed the FBI to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records on an arbitrarily short deadline in March, and the FBI was directed to flag any documents that mentioned President Trump. Nothing came of that review until July when DOJ and FBI released an unsigned memo stating, quote, "There's no incriminating client list." Why was the July 7th memo unsigned?
The July 7th memo came from the FBI and the Department of Justice. Director Patel answered those questions very clear. And, you know, Senator Durbin, I find it very interesting that you refused repeated Republican requests to release the Epstein flight logs in 2023 and 2024. You fought that. Did you take money from Reid Hoffman, campaign donations,
Never
who was
heard.
a huge Epstein friend? Why did you fight for years? Why did you fight to not disclose the flight logs, Senator Durbin?
I can tell you I did not refuse. One of the senators here wished to produce those logs, and I asked her to put it in writing, and she never did.
Yeah, I think Senator Blackburn would quarrel with you on that. But
Well,
that's
I will
up to the
quarrel
two
with
of
you as to Reid, somebody that you mentioned I never heard of.
Reid Hoffman.
So who gave the order to flag records related to President Trump?
To flag records for President Trump?
To flag any records which included his name.
I'm not going to discuss anything about that with you, Senator.
Eventually, you're going to have to answer for your conduct in this. And you won't do it today, but eventually you will. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
I got to
Mr.
interject
Chairman?
something here.
Mr.
before I
Chairman.
get to Pam.
Mr. Chairman, since Senator Durbin referred to me, I would really appreciate the opportunity to correct the record.
Proceed.
Because Senator Durbin knows I repeatedly asked for those flight logs. I brought up the subpoena. You even shut down the committee because you didn't want that, and you know I submitted that in writing, and you continue to misrepresent that, and I am not going to let that record stand.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead, Senator Durbin.
I just want to make it clear that the reason the committee business ended was that your side invoked the 2-hour rule. Point number 2 is I asked you if you wanted any documents like flight logs to put it in writing. You never did.
Yes, sir, I did, and your staff knows that I did.
No,
We'll submit, once again,
Send me a copy of
the
that, please.
information to you. We've done that several times, but we'll be happy to, once again, send it to
disagree.
you. I think your staff doesn't.
Let's confront what we just watched, because this wasn't one argument, it was a blueprint. It begins with a question that sounds simple. Did you talk to the White House? But it isn't really a question. It's a setup, because no matter how she answers, the storyline is already written. If she says yes, they shout, politicized DOJ. If she says no, they shout, out of control White House. And if she says she can't discuss internal conversations, then it becomes cover up. That isn't oversight. That's theater, built to generate headlines, not clarity. And what makes it worse is what happens underneath that theater. Watch the pivot. Durbin jumps from National Guard to grants, to ethics, to foreign gifts, and then lands on the headline fuel. Epstein, it's a rhythm you can feel. He frames it as scandal. She frames it as safety. He frames it as secrecy. She frames it as confidentiality and operational reality. You don't have to love every sharp line she throws out. Some of it is political, but you also can't ignore what's happening to the priorities in the room. Because when the conversation touches crime, drugs, and public safety, Durbin keeps steering it back to one gravitational center. Trump, not victims, not prevention, not measurable enforcement outcomes, not what are you doing to stop fentanyl, not what's the plan to help communities right now. It becomes who flagged Trump, who signed the memo, why wasn't it signed, who ordered it. Those questions might matter in a vacuum, but that's not how the exchange plays. It doesn't feel like a search for truth. It feels like a search for ammunition. Then comes the moment that should make any viewer pause. Bondi refuses to answer who ordered the flagging. Durbin hears the refusal and basically says, you'll answer eventually. Now ask yourself, what is that? Accountability or an attempt to plant a conclusion without proving it? Because if you have evidence, present it. If you have documentation, put it on the record. If you have a verified paper trail, show the American people. But what we saw was insinuation, escalation, and a demand for an answer that can't be cleanly packaged into a soundbite, followed by the refusal being treated like guilt. That's a media strategy, not a legal strategy. And right on cue, everything fractures into a side fight. Blackburn jumps in to correct the record about flight logs. Durbin says, No, you didn't. Blackburn says, yes, I did. Suddenly, it's not even about transparency anymore. It's about who can accuse the other side of hiding transparency first. That's the swamp in real time. Here's the deeper problem. When everything becomes gotcha, nothing becomes governance. The country watches leaders who can't even agree on what was submitted in writing, while families watch the cost of chaos climb: crime, drugs, disorder, border pressure, and collapsing trust. Instead of disciplined focus on results, we get narrative warfare, personal vendettas, and political obsession dressed up as oversight. This isn't just about Durbin versus Bondi. It's about a political class that treats every crisis like a stage. So the brutal question is, who benefits from turning oversight into obsession? Because if your entire political identity is Trump, 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 you never have to answer for what you didn't fix. You keep the cameras rolling, keep the audience angry, and keep attention locked on one name. And that's why what happens next, outside that hearing room, matters more than any speech inside it. Because it will reveal whether this was ever about facts or always about positioning for headlines.